I just want to assure others that it's not as complex as you might think to speak from the oneness, to speak from the higher self, which is what I teach and which is what I wish to offer encouragement to everyone, because as far as I'm concerned, that's really the only reason why I exist. Everyone has the capacity within their own intelligence system, their own thought system, to reach for a higher thought system, if you will. It's not that difficult. And in some ways that creates the greatest problem, is because we think it's going to be so difficult. We think it's going to be the greatest challenge that there is. When you think of the concept of speaking to the highest that there is, or allowing yourself to meet it and becoming one with its voice or its thought system, and just allowing the purest expression of it that there is. So I'm already connected to that voice a little bit, but I wanted to give you an example of what it is and how simple it is to just really become one with that highest thought system, the highest self, the oneness, whatever you want to call it, the first branch of consciousness out of source, and to just allow it its fullest expression on behalf of someone else. Now, why I say this is because source doesn't think about itself in the same context that a human does. It doesn't think, I want this for myself. It simply wants to know itself. It wants to realize, or be awakened, if you will, that it does exist. And there's not much more to it than that. This furthest extension of the self as we know it, where our human lives exist, doesn't recall, if you will, that we are part of the oneness, that we are part of that source, that we are its extension, as if we were the ray of the sun in this physical existence. And so what I offer, and what I hope others will just attempt to experiment with on their own, is to reach for that source within the center of your chest, so that it can be known, so that you can come to identify it as your source of all of your consciousness, and the further extension of where your human source or human self exists. I do often describe it as having 3 levels of consciousness: the higher self, the middle self, and the lower self. All of them are a part of the whole. It's not like there's levels or divisions for you to accomplish in order to reach for one and then go over another hurdle and reach for the highest self. It's not that at all. All it is you becoming more familiar with that aspect of yourself that is whole, that is of the one, that is an expression of the highest form of self. We always have a choice. Do I want to express myself from just purely from my human skin, from my human thought system, or do I want to connect with the oneness? And it's a thought that one would think is simple, but somehow, because it's simple, it makes it so complex. So the messages I give again and again are just simple reminders of how to, first of all, recognize that we're part of the oneness, and then second of all, allow ourselves to be an expression of it for someone else. And again, that is reminiscent of what the source itself does. It just allows itself its fullest expression, and trusts that within that, it does begin to recognize where it begins. So again, just a very simple example of what I do is I just begin to center. I focus on the center of my chest. I ask where I'm whole, if I feel like I'm a little bit scattered in my human self. And I just let that thought system begin. And when I hear the same thought come in once or twice, then I allow myself to start speaking, and eventually my human thought just becomes more of a witness to this than anything else. So from the oneness, I will begin. We've said in the past, we often do this with our eyes closed. It's not necessary. We're going to have a conversation with our eyes open at this point. It's not as if we channel. We truly are just reaching for that oneness, that highest source of consciousness that there is within ourselves. And we do this just not, again, so that we won't be a channel, but so that we will just emanate our truest source of consciousness. For when that's your intention, to be whole on behalf of someone else, that's the natural consequence of this, and we can't prevent it from happening, nor do we need to control what comes from this. So when I ask, where am I the oneness, or where am I whole, and how may I be of service from this, there's this gentle emanation that starts from the surface of myself toward the whole, toward the whole of this lower consciousness as well. And I can't control it, nor do I want to, because it's so gentle. It's almost like it doesn't have a consciousness to it. The purest part of what comes through this type of expression is just simple consciousness, or a simple emanation of source, and there's nothing more to it. And if I try to make it more complex and make it different divisions and think that I want to mete it out to different people for different reasons, for I think they have some sort of challenge in their circumstance, then it becomes very muddied by my own human consciousness. When I want to resort to the oneness, I simply recollect that I am the oneness. And perhaps if it's specific to certain people, I might draw them into my lower self-awareness at the same moment. In other words, my attention remains on the oneness where I'm whole, and somehow I'm able to just bring up an image of them or a thought system, and almost immediately they'll disappear from my consciousness, simply because my highest consciousness will kick in where the oneness is, and it knows exactly how to first of all, help me to lose control, and second of all, how to just lift the whole. It doesn't try to manipulate our lower consciousness or form of existence. It merely wants to represent itself, and it wants others to recognize that they are a part of this. Why? Well, that's a bigger question, and something that you can discover within yourself. Once you give up control of needing to know what the answer is and why we do all of this, and once you just silently sit within yourself and practice that focused meditation, you don't need to know the exact location of this. It's not like there's a hole where the highest self comes and sits in the lower consciousness. But if you think of the heart center as being somewhat of the middle, of having that higher and lower consciousness come together, again, something we call the middle self, you can begin to trust that it knows how to meld, because again, it's part of the whole. It is not different levels. And when I do this, I might feel some tension within myself. I might feel a gentle flutter. I might feel that it does feel like a whole. It does feel like there's this vacuous space of consciousness, and that might cause a little bit of panic. That is the ultimate gift. But in the beginning stages, it does feel as if we've gone into an abyss rather than into where we are whole. So whatever you reflect upon, if you need to, call upon the image of an animal, call upon the image of a small diamond, if light is what represents your version of what the highest consciousness is, and just give yourself some attention and be its witness. There's nothing more that's required of knowing that you are the oneness or the highest consciousness than just wanting to hold it within your lowest self and your lowest consciousness. With wanting them to meld. Again, wanting is the key here. It's not so that I can control some part of this lower consciousness. It isn't this. It's so that I can be this gift of something that I can't control, because that is the greatest gift of wanting to know the oneness. What a relief this is, for once, to not need to control something from my lowest consciousness, from where I perceive myself to be a human. I get to relinquish this and just welcome in that highest spot of consciousness and allow it to lose control. It doesn't want to control any of this. It just simply wants us to remain a part of its awareness, of its consciousness. And again, it starts to, if you need a human example, filter down into our human consciousness or our human awareness, the lower self. And then it just makes its own transformation, meaning that the lower self wants to know more of where it's whole. It doesn't want to do any damage to its personal self anymore. It wants to meld, if you will, with something higher. So again, that's where we meet in the middle. And again, why do we do this? I highly recommend that you sit and ask yourself that question for yourself, so that you can have a sense of why you want to be whole, because you wouldn't have sat through this video or read anything about this consciousness if you weren't already drawn to this. And that's the only requirement for this, again, is that you want to know where you are whole for the benefit of others. It is implicit within the question, when you look within, how may I be of service, that you will automatically come to know yourself as the oneness. So the rest of our journey with this is simply recognizing that it is such a simple description of being whole as the oneness that we often miss it. We look for something more complex, which is why we might have to take that first step of having some sort of visualization, animal, diamond, vegetable, it doesn't matter, within the center of your chest. It's more about the location. It's more about the intent of wanting to witness what happens when the higher and lower consciousness come together in an act of service. And so that's what we offer through this very simple video. Isn't so much you should do this or you should want to do this. It's just simply so that you will recognize where you are perfect, where you are already whole because you want to be of this service, and that you will give up looking for direct results from it, because there are no direct results. What happens when we allow that oneness or that highest consciousness to permeate through our own existence on behalf of others is it will lift the whole, meaning the whole of this lower consciousness or physical existence world in general, for those who want it. So again, it is not about control. It is about me offering as Jill, through my witness, the highest self that I know, what I call the oneness, for your benefit, if this is something you would like to know as well. And you don't even need to practice it the way that I, as Jill, practice this. This is what I have come to know. This is what I was taught from the highest self, from the Christ consciousness, and from those who remain at that level in order to help me, to help others to know how to access this for themselves. You just simply need to call for help within yourself. Help me to not ignore this. Help me to not ignore the call. Help me to not miss where I am this consciousness, because it's so simple. I might not notice it at all. I'm so used to everything being flashy. Everything that I think has significance has to have power behind it, or has to have some sort of monumental display of its prowess in this world. And it really doesn't. When you start to feel the oneness, it will feel so simple that you might not even feel it at all, which is its purest self. And that is what we want to bring into this lower world. So how you do it, it matters not. What matters is that you acknowledge that this is what you want in this world, and you simply reach for it. This is what happened to Jill. She wondered, how can I cope? How can I function in this world? I feel like there's something with so much significance that I'm supposed to accomplish, but I don't know how to do that in this world. And I'm tired of looking for it in something else. And so those answers just started pouring in, and she became a dictation specialist, if you will. She started listening to our answers and writing them as fast as they came in. And then eventually it was given to her to come through the voice as well. This took a little bit of practice, but was more surprise than anything else, because again, there is no gift to this. There's just simply the willingness that allows you to draw in from your highest self so that everyone else can recognize it within themselves as well. So we'll leave you with this. We did want to create an even shorter video, but we've gone on a little bit with this as well, simply because we know it is so important that you want to know yourself as the oneness, as your highest self, as the Christ consciousness, whatever you wish to call it. It does not matter. It's that highest expression of self, the first division where source begins to know itself as a consciousness. And that's what we're speaking of here. We're all a part of this. From it, you cannot be separate. And so we just wish to welcome you back to it. And so it is. Amen. And now we'll draw you back to Jill, just so you can see a difference with it. Just so that you can see what happens when we begin to want our human expression with it again. And so again, we're somewhere in the middle with it, where Jill does want to know herself as this expression, where she does want it to be for your benefit. But then a little part of her will start to panic and think, no, I want to be separate. I want to be myself. this is an embarrassment, I can't post this on the internet, and so on. But she does this because she wants you to feel the confidence in starting to create your own content, if you will. In that, what matters most is that you just reach for it, because that's the greatest service that there is. It lifts the whole. What more could you want than that for other people, than even for your own consciousness? It's not selfish when you wish for this. And so again, we'll just gradually come back more down to Jill's consciousness. But the ultimate gift is that Jill gets to know that this is her consciousness. She won't refer to herself as Jill, which is really important in this for her as well. But it is for you that we give this example. And it is through Jill's willingness that we allow it to come in this form, in this format, so that you can start to witness it and hopefully begin to experiment with this for yourself. Again, the only thing that matters is the willingness, and that you reach for the highest aspect of self, or whatever you consider the source of all to be. And so it is. And so welcome back to Jill. Amen.